So where we left off, we have just finished getting all the pieces together. So we know what the last scene was, right? We've watched the last scene.
A poem I wrote.
So we're going into the poem, and the piece of paper is becoming our piece of paper, okay? So now you can see I've already started working on the next aspect here, right? So what I'm doing is I'm gonna leave this layer, which is a white solid, that's gonna be our paper throughout this entire thing, okay? So what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna end up masking it so it looks like this is the edge of a story that's happening. So we're gonna frame the story inside this little mask, okay? And so that's going to be kind of the edge of where we're going with when we're making it look like a piece of paper. So we can separate these worlds out. But first, I have to create the world that I'm putting in there. Okay. So to do that, what I want to do first is I want to create the background. I need some kind of background environment for everything to happen on. If we go into here, okay, and this is the character introductions where we have all the characters and everything that's happening. The background behind them is still an elaborate piece that's been put together. It's this layer back here, the park, and the park is many layers as well. So this is just Natalie and Monica, right? And the little piece of paper poem. Everything else that happens, all the birds flying around, all the movement that's happening, I've put into the park so that, again, I can separate it out and keep it different from what's going on in the video. So if we watch the opening of this, give me 1 second, it has to load because it is loading. This is the delight with After Effects, is you can tell it's literally loading frame by frame by frame. And because it's fading from black, this is not something we think about, but every single pixel has to be replaced every single frame because they're all getting slightly brighter, slightly brighter. So a fade from black takes a lot more time, or like a full image fade takes a lot more time than just editing something small, because if you're editing something small, it keeps everything else moving in time. So now I have this green bar that we talked about. This is the green bar that identifies where we are in time. So I'm going to go back and now we can watch that much of it. Okay. So we have the birds flying around. Okay. If I double click on this on the park, on the background itself, this is the composition that is being used for the background. So behind Natalie and Monica, this is the background that's happening. And here's what happens. Each one of these, this is the yellow bird, the blue bird, the perched green, the blue flyer, the yellow splashing, the orange flyer, the brown eating, and the eating purple. So this is what's going on behind the composition that's happening with Natalie and them. Again, we have to wait for it to load, so bear with as it does because there's many things changing as it goes. Let me see if I have anything else I can close to make this run faster. I could just, no, I need that. Yep. Oh, well, here we go. It's where we live. So basically everything that's happening behind each of these characters. And there's also, just a note in After Effects, something that the little circle dot here, it pinpoints one layer so we can see just that layer. So if I just want to see the light blue flyer, this is its action in the scene. Okay, so again, it has to re-render it because now it doesn't have all that other stuff in it, so it doesn't know exactly what's interacting with each other as it goes. It will render a little faster than otherwise because it's the only thing it's rendering. It's not doing math for all of this. It's only doing math for that little bit, okay? So then when I play this in time, so he scales a little smaller and then he moves around and we can actually look at this, right? So we're looking at his position, his scale, and his rotation. So the position is where it is, the scale is how big it is, and the rotation is what makes it look like it's flying. If it wasn't rotating as it moved in time, it wouldn't look like it was flying. And we can actually see that path, right? So that's the path it's going to take. And we just track that nose to kind of follow to give it the feeling of flying. So if I turn off the eyeball, so that's the solo layer, we get all of them and we can see this one flying in relation to the others. Okay. Now notice the yellow bird is bigger perspective, right? It's closer to us. So it flies over each of the blue birds. It would not make sense if the blue bird flew over the yellow bird. So how do you make sure that's how it happens the right way? working bottom to top, right? Bottom layer is the lowest, and each one in front of it is a piece of translucent paper that has your image on it. So if we look at the very bottom layer, that's the finished park background. So just by itself, that's just that image. I deleted all the birds out of the image from the book. And it's actually kind of cool. If you go right here, this is the moment when everything lines up exactly the way the book does. So I just kind of did this as a little, nobody will ever notice this but me. But if you actually look in the book, this is the moment that we're seeing. And I timed it out so that basically it would be that moment. This is what we're seeing. And so only at that 1 second does everything line up exactly the way it should. But we have one bird playing in the water, and we have birds eating on the ground, and we have birds flying, and we have birds perched in the sky. Okay. So that's the background layer, and that's all happening underneath what's happening here. You can manipulate compositions the same way you can manipulate images. So I want that entire background to move as one thing behind Natalie. So if I had all the layers here and I tried to move the background, I'd have to get everything to move at the same rate so that it moves. So look, if I just do this here, if I just select this layer, this is just the background. It's just fading and moving. So the scale is changing, right? The scale is getting bigger and the position is changing. If I zoom out, we can actually see the outline of the composition. Okay. So that square is the park composition, right? That's the square. This is the square and how we're framing it on the screen. Okay. So the sky isn't moving, or well, I mean, the camera isn't moving. The sky is moving. It's kind of that reverse idea. So watch this moment in time. It gets bigger, it zooms out or zooms in to get closer, and it pans down so that we go from the top of the tree down to the bottom corner. Let's just give it a second to load so that it can get its full image together. We'll sip of coffee while it does its thing. It will continue loading when you're running it. So if I stop here and I go back to the beginning, it'll continue loading what it's missing, but you'll catch up to it usually. So I don't usually go too far. But look at the scale of the box. And then as I move, you can see the scale get smaller, right? Here's 100% opacity. So this keyframe, when the slider gets to that keyframe, it'll be at 100% opacity. So this keyframe is 0% opacity. So as it moves, it goes from 0 to 100. And you can even watch right here, the actual opacity it's at what point, right? And the scale is the same way and the movement's the same way. So I just wanted that to be related with Natalie. So if I take out this so that we zoom in on Natalie and we have a little bit more interesting, I'm actually going to zoom back in. So if you go to here, fit up to 200% is the best because it just fills your screen with whatever you can. All right, so we watch this again with everybody. We get Natalie coming in from the bottom and the birds coming in and flying around. Okay, cool. I don't want to sit and let this load forever, so I want to jump into what we're actually doing. So first, like I mentioned, we're going to create the background for the next scene. So when we go out, the park is our furthest, smallest composition. That's right here. This is like Inception. Think about it like Inception, right? A dream within a dream. The park is the deepest dream down right now. The next dream layer up is the character introductions, which is the scene. Then that whole composition, this whole thing from here to over here, is the one line. Sorry, that's a different scene. Is this one line. So this one composition is all of that in one spot. Cool? I hope this is making sense. I'm not really going to ask for a reaction because I can't really get a good one, but I'm assuming we're getting this. If we have questions, let me know, and I'll also take questions at the end. So let's jump into composition. So basically, we have this one done. Let's remember the story real quick. And we're going to listen through to the audio so we can refresh our memory about what's supposed to happen in this scene.
Here's a poem I wrote.
And when we think of it, we're going to be doing background. I'm going to call it middle ground and then foreground. Foreground are our characters. Background is our surface that's behind everything. And our middle is everything else that's happening. So whether it's the birds flying or animations that are happening in the middle. Okay. So here we go. This is the poem she wrote.
Striped pants, crazy dance. Last chance Romance.
I'm even going to let it play just so you can see what's happening in the next scene after this. Okay, so the image will fade out of the poem.
You see, I can't help writing poems. My mother says, Natalie, you're a natural, and so does Monica. But she wants me to read.
And we start getting weird. But that gives you an idea of where we're headed. So basically, we're just creating now what's happening on that piece of paper in between. So we are going to work in this main layer, in this main composition. And the reason is our audio is right here, right? When I go into the other compositions, the audio layer is not present. So I could copy and paste it and bring it in. But then in effect, what's going to happen is it's going to play out of your composition as well. So if I drop an audio layer in here so I can edit inside the composition, it will play in this composition as well as it will play here in this composition. So you will get twice the audio, right? So just thinking about that, you're welcome to drop them into the other files and work with it as you need to, however far you have to go. But what I like to do is I like to think about how much this is going to be, and that distance is how I start to figure out where I'm going to make my composition lengths, okay? So we're starting with the background. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and drop in my background, which I already know what it's going to be. Let's see, we're in scene 3, first poem background. Now, here's the tricky aspect of this. Okay, this background, we're going to be on top of our white solid. So I'm going to put it right on top. First of all, it's not the right size for this. So if I zoom out, okay, we can see the background is not the same size as the image, and that's intentional because basically what I'm going to want to do when I scale this down, what we're going to do is it's going to be over here, and then as it moves from one side to the other, we're transitioning from one part of the city to the other and from night to day, okay, or from day to night, okay? So instead of scaling it down like that, I'm going to keep it at its natural size, and I'm going to take it and put it into a different composition, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and make a composition for it, and I know the length of it, it's going to be the end of the poem, right? Just to give myself a little leeway, I'm going to say that's the length, okay? So from the beginning of the poem to the end of the poem, that's going to be how long my background should be, and that's what's going to be our starting spot. So I am going to pre-compose this. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is just kind of part of my process. So this is going to be background, first poem. And that's going to make its own composition. So that composition appears right here, and it appeared in the base poem, in the files for the, it populated where the original file was so we can see it, okay? So now when it turned it into a composition, it made it full scale. So my other composition is the size of a television, right? So it's 1920 by 1080, okay? So this is not the same size. If I go into composition, composition, edit composition settings. I don't know why that wasn't appearing last time. This is 7,327 pixels wide by 2,280 pixels tall. So we will be scaling it down a bit when we put it into the file, but we're going to scale the composition, not the image, okay? We're going to create our city, our full cityscape in what we're seeing here, okay? So what that means is I'm going to need a marker to identify when we're moving from one part of the poem to the next. This is the first page of Crazy Pants, or Striped Pants Crazy Dance, and then everything else happens in this environment, right? So basically, I want to know when I'm going to have to start transitioning. So I'm going to go back to my full composition, and your marker will be in the same space no matter what composition you're in. So if I find the spot I'm looking for, oops, I'm too far ahead. I'm in the wrong one.
Pants. Crazy dance.
So last chance ambulance, I'm going to zoom in a little bit by hitting my plus key next to the delete, that the plus or equal. That will zoom me in on this. So this is where the end of the transition is going to want to happen, and the beginning is going to want to happen.
Dance.
So crazy dance. So we'll start transitioning at like, I'll go even closer, I'll get more. So we're going to go from 34 to
Last.
so last chance is at 41. So we're going from 34 to 41. Cool. So if I go into this composition by double clicking it, I'm at 34 right now, and I'm going to 41. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to zoom in. Okay. This is, ooh, yo, stop. I got my sidebar coming in. So basically this little thing right here is markers. So you grab it and you pull one out and it's marker 1. You can double click it and rename it if you want, like starting point or finishing point or whatever. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to double click it and I'm going to say start transition. That's not how you spell that. Oh no, that was how you spell that. No, my gosh, my eyes are terrible, sorry. Start transition, and then I'm going to grab another one and I'm going to say end transition. So I'm going to go back to my main composition.
Last.
So we're going to go right there, and I'm going to double click here onto that same composition. I'm going to grab the second one, which is going to be end transition. Okay. So what that means is that's the time it's going to take for me to move from one side to the other. Okay. So if I zoom out, that is our, wait, what's the one? Let me get rid of the one. Sorry about that. Okay. So we have our start transition and our end transition. This is the beginning portion. And then I want to figure out how long this is going to be. So if I go to the end of my composition, I'm just going to go to last mark. I'm going to double click in here. That'll take me into it. Then I'm going to do Option or Alt and then the closed right bracket, which will just end. It trims basically to the end of that side. If my composition was shorter and I hit Option or Alt, depending on what you're on, and the same button, it would extend it. So basically it just brings the end of your composition to that spot. If you use the open bracket, which is the beginning bracket, it'll do it with the other side. It'll move it to where your bar is, okay? So that's just kind of a little shortcut. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit N. N just brings in my focus area, right? So this little bar here is now the focus of my composition. If I were to run it, it would go to that mark and it would jump back to the beginning so I could just work this segment, right? Instead of doing that, I'm going to hold Shift, Command, and X, and that's going to trim my composition down to that length. Now, my length goes from 0 seconds to 47 seconds. So basically what that's saying is, in the full video, this poem is 47 seconds long, right? So basically from here to here is 47 seconds long. So when I'm working in here, I now know what needs to happen based on those movements, right? So my transition is going to start here to there, but that's not going to happen in here because I'm just animating on here. But what that means is we're not going to see anything on the right-hand side until we get to this point. So I'm only going to animate things on the left-hand side at the beginning, and I'm only going to animate things on the right-hand side at the end, because that's exactly how it's going to work when we see what happens on one side or the other, right? I'm not going to animate the guys dancing over here when it's off screen, because there's no point to it. It's just running RAM and causing things to work harder than they need to. So what that means, let's see. Let me jump back. I'm going to go back into the main one, and I'm going to scale this to fit so I can see exactly what's going to be on the screen. So now we're scaling our composition, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, fit up to so I can see. So again, this is our full image that we'll see on in the video. So right now I'm going to just grab, and I hold Shift to make sure it moves just left and right, but I'm going to grab and move it over. So there we go. So this is basically our starting frame. This is what we're going to see when we're working. I might even expand this a little bit. I want to focus on this half. So I might even go ahead and just kind of like make it bigger to the point where I can't see much of the city at all, and then I will just zoom in to get the full city in, so that this gives me more of the rural first. So if I can get rid of the city by going bigger and keeping, right? Actually, one second, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna change this to 1280. So this is what a laptop would see instead of what a television would see. Television will fix it too, but I think everybody's gonna be accessing this on TV. So they'll just do that. And that'll give me a little more of the sky. Cool, and we have the ground and we still have a little bit of the city. I do wanna keep going. I'm gonna try to push this city out of the shot. Cool, and that's gonna be the starting look of our background. So basically, in my mind, I know I got up to the tree and I got a little bit over into the city. So we're going to jump back into this composition and I'm gonna start animating. So what's going on in the composition? So I'm gonna jump back over to my book so I can actually see what's happening. So in the first location, there is nothing but the two characters. There's no moving people. There's no, right? There's nothing that in this is actually going to move other than the two characters. So that's going to happen in our main layer later. I'm still working on just the background right now. In our next image, we're going to have the bicycle person waving. We're going to have the the doctor and the ambulance are all going to be part of the main composition. So that's not going to be background, that's going to be foreground. These folks are not going to be in the image, just for clarity. I don't want it to look like they're getting run over and I don't want them to get hit, so I don't have them. The animals are going to be reacting to what's happening to the main story. So I'm not going to add them, but I will add in this cat in this window because this cat is not interacting with the storyline. So I'll animate it in the background. This lady here that's holding the umbrella, I'll animate in the background because she's not interacting with the story. And I'll animate this character in the background because they're not interacting with the story as well, right? So I can't hear the story in here, so I can't animate them with it. So I'm going to animate all the things that move that are going to be a consistent movement throughout the story, right? So basically at this moment, I'm ignoring the story to just work on the background. So I'm going to go back into After Effects and I'm going to grab, let's do the first thing first. I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit so I can see just this half. Okay, a little bit out. Let me see, we'll just go to 40, no, 33, so that's gonna let me, that's fine. Okay, so the first thing is gonna be the bicycle person waving. I'm gonna jump myself over to know where they are. Okay, so basically they're standing right here waving. So what I wanna do is I wanna grab, wrong file, let's see. What did I call? Still biker and still biker arm. Both of those are going to be added to this composition. All right. So definitely bigger than they are in this shot. So I'm going to go ahead while I have them both clicked together. I'm just going to scale them together up to the size that I want, which is about, let's say that's good. I'm going to jump back over to here. That looks pretty good. In relation to the house, they're about maybe 1.5 the height of the house, right? So if I go back into After Effects, just to make sure I'm doing it right, I'm gonna select both of them and I'm gonna grab and move them over to the house. And I'll actually go even a little bit bigger just to make sure they're not too small. Bring it back down to its spot. This is where it's gonna live. Because I wanna be consistent, right? All the other animations, everything has a drop shadow to make it look like it is happening on it, to make it look more like it's a puppet, a dimensional puppet, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab, and I've been consistently using the drop shadow. I'm going to copy, so command copy. Then I'm going to jump over to my other background and I have these two still selected. So I'm going to command paste. And now that drop shadow drops to both the arm and the person, right? So it's the same distance, it's the same opacity, it's consistent. It's copy pasting because if you just add a new one every time, it's going to look slightly different in each scene. And you want consistency is key to make sure that you're getting what you want out of the story. Okay, so that being said, the arm is what's going to wave. So what I want to do, the start of the transition is when we're going to start moving over here, right? So basically, this area, we shouldn't see it in the main, oops, sorry, I'm just gonna close this and go to this one. So we shouldn't see how we see her a little bit. That means we have to change this composition a little more. We're gonna have to make it even a little bigger and keep going over until we get that person out of the shot, because we don't want to start the story by understanding what's happening in the next part of the poem, right? So, and actually we can even play with this. So if we want to see this whole height, we can start high up and zoom down as we go. We'll do that in a second, but basically first I want to make sure that I got that person out of the shot, right? So we are good. This is what we'll see for the first scene, which is pretty spot on for what we're looking for the book. So I'm going to jump back in here. I'm going to animate this person. So to do that, what I'm going to do, the still biker is not going to do anything. They're just going to stand still. The arm itself, I'm going to give a wiggle. Okay. So I'm going to go over to the effects and I'm going to pick wiggle by typing it. I will go down to rotation because that's what I want to wiggle. So I'm going to drag and drop it so that it's on the arm, not the biker. The wiggle is going to be on the arm. It is important that the arm be below the biker, right? So if I'm above, we'll see the joint of the arm as it moves, right? We'll see that joint and that looks terrible. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that this biker is below here so that when the arm waves, it's going to do it slow for a second because it's figuring itself out. And I'm going to go ahead and go out to, well, just go to a little bigger so we can see what the impact would be from a distance. Go a little bit closer than that. Rapid zoom. It's still rendering the same thing. It's still rendering the full image, so zooming doesn't affect it. There we go. That's a nice size. So from the start of the transition is when we want that wiggle to happen, the wave to happen, because we're going to, at that point is when we're going to start moving. So we're going to start seeing these people. So we want to make sure that we can see that wave as we move over, right? So I'm going to hold Option and I'm going to hit the left bracket, the left close bracket, and that will, excuse me, coffee, that will bring in the start of my composition. So if I go one frame over by holding Command or Control and hitting the left arrow, I'm over here. This person is no longer in this keyframe. They're in the keyframe. They're out of the keyframe, but it's no longer having to render and process that wiggle movement the whole time. So let's see what that wiggle movement is. And basically the wiggle will last the entire scene. It will be a speed of 1 and it will be 30 degrees. That's how far it will go. So 15 degrees in either direction. Or it may go 30 degrees in either direction to give you 60. It depends. I can't remember offhand which it is. I just futz with it until it looks like a human person. That's what we're going for here. Okay, so if I just play it, so it's wiggling a little far, right? So I'm gonna bring the wiggle down to like 25. I'm also gonna rotate it a bit because it's wiggling a little past the edge of the sleeve. So it looks like they're waving like up here. So I'm actually gonna just alter the rotation of the arm. Oh, wait, I have both selected. That was my mistake. 1 second. I want just the biker arm selected, and then I'm going to rotate that, and I'm just going to rotate that down. So now it's just down a little bit. It's 20 degrees lower. Now the wiggle will still happen, and it has to re-render because it's reprocessing this. But this is what the actual wiggle will look like. Just give it a second. We can't evaluate anything until we see it in time. So this is kind of the aspect where you just have to be patient, and this is how After Effects works. Zoom ain't helping. All right. That looks pretty human. Quite happy with that. Cool. So the other thing that's going to have to happen here, let's look at, let's put the umbrella person in. So the umbrella person is just going to hang out and close my control or my effects panel, and I can get to umbrella person, umbrella girl. All right, I'm going to leave it in at the same spot, and I'm going to put, so they're over here. I could just literally grab two and just move if I want. I'm going to zoom in over there so I can get a better look. I'm going to jump to my other image from the book because I have that as a resource. So I'm going to look. So basically the top of the umbrella is at the top of this window and her feet are at the bottom of at the middle of the flower. And notice when I got rid of the background, I added another flower because I was just doing a, what was it called? I was doing a clone stamp on this. This is this flower, right? It's just that same flower. So the first thing I want to do before I forget is I'm going to grab the drop shadow. I'm going to copy the drop shadow. So Command C and Command V to give the umbrella girl a drop shadow. Transform. I'm going to scale her up so that she's in size with where I want. So more like over here. I do think I want her to be out of the flowers. I don't want her like legit just like standing on flowers. So I think it'd be nice either there or she could be up here. If she's up here, she could be a little smaller because she'll be further away. So let's see. I'm gonna shrink this down so I have to look at that. So that kind of means she's not standing in the flowers, which is fine. Do I like it better down here? Yay! Where do I want to go with this? Let's see. Let's just put it down in the corner because then it's a little more focus. And we have the biker that's going to be going on the upper part. So we don't want to steal focus from the biker. So the other thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm just going to have this person wiggle rotate a little bit. Actually, let's try. Let's try Wiggle Rama just to see what it does with this. So I'm going to drag and drop Wiggle Rama. I'm definitely going to want to throw the anchor down to the feet. So the anchor point is right here. I can control it, just moves your image along the anchor point, but the anchor point doesn't move. So the anchor point right there. So I'm just going to try to put this down towards the center of her feet. So that we'll bring this down so that it rotates around that circle. Scale, it's going to change too. It's changing everything. So nervousness, position, rotation, scale, width. Nah, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to, that's way too much. Actually, I'm just going to play with her. I'm just going to play with the wiggle, but that does mean I'm going to keep, I'm going to keep the anchor point at the bottom. Do note, Wiggle-O-Rama has an effect that plays its effect on transform. So those both, when you add it, it adds both of those because it's how it's affecting the transformation. So your transform in here is how much scale height, how much width, how much skew. You can change all that stuff. What I'm getting at is if I delete Wiggle-Rama, I get this error because now there's an effect on a transform that doesn't exist. So I have to delete that as well to get rid of that effect, okay? So then I'm gonna go over here and I'll just do rotation. I'm gonna put it on, I can drag it down to here and then we'll see wiggle rotation and notice transform comes with it. I don't really edit in transform. I try to stick with just the rotation speed and distance, but we'll see depending on what comes out of this. So I do want to drop this down. I don't think we're gonna need 30 degrees. I think 10 degrees is gonna be plenty. So I'm gonna bring her position down. And this will just give a little bit of life and a little bit of movement to this corner, like the same way the birds do when they're pecking at something or just standing there. So this is even a bit much. She's kind of rocking a lot. So maybe let's do like 0.5 is her speed and we'll make the movement down to like 5. And let's see. Gonna have to give it a second while it does its load. We can also just show just this layer because it will make it go a little faster. So sometimes this is easier just to get an idea when I'm trying to when I'm trying to figure the wiggle or figure some kind of effect that I'm applying. I'll often just close everything else out by doing just this solo layer so that I can get this to process faster and see where I'm headed. So now let's go ahead and just go back. It's going pretty fast. I'm gonna let it get to like 25. Coffee break. Great. So let's see. Let's even make her go just a little bit faster. Oop, not that. Let's go 0.8. Again, unfortunately, because it has to render it again, it's going to take a second because it has to go through all those frames as it changes how fast it does something because it affects every single frame. And this can get really tedious, and I apologize, but that's part of the game. Is the more time you spend getting the finer details to look nice, the better everything plays later. Detail is where everything is. You want people to go, oh, I wouldn't have expected you to do that. That seems like a bit much. That's when you get a good, something that's worth watching. All right, so this movement is now, yeah, she's kind of just hanging out, rocking back and forth, just doing a little thing. That's great. I'm going to scooch over just a little bit so that it's not so, it doesn't go accidentally off screen. I'm going to bring it down a little bit, and then let's see. And this will go the entire length. So again, the composition length is how long we're going to need this background to be. Okay, so umbrella person is great. Let's go ahead and do the biker. Now the biker is going to be even a little more complex, okay? Because I want the wheels to rotate. So I'm going to grab all three. So the wheel 1, wheel 2, and the moving biker. And I'm going to bring those down. And I'm going to line them up so they all start at the same time. I'm going to zoom in. Let's actually just have everybody start at the right spot. Okay, so where are our biker? Doesn't matter, they're coming over here anyway. So right now, everything has got its central focus. This spot is where the biker is in the book. So let's go ahead and take a peek at the book real quick just to see. That's our biker filling up a decent amount of the front of that building, covering that space there. So the biker is going to move, but we can start with that spot because we can get our perspective there. So transform, I'm going to make this bigger. And I'm just going for the rough size of the biker in relation to the building. Great. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to close this so I don't have to look at it. Let's see. So I want to make sense of the bike. So I'm going to move one wheel in the front, which is right there. And I'm going to move the other wheel. Oop, that's the biker. Sorry. There it is. Move the other wheel in the back. Let's take a peek at the image again to make sure I'm getting this correct. That looks pretty good. The back wheel, the biker is going to be like that. And then let's jump and look. There's actually some space, and the wheel is underneath the biker, not behind like I have it. So let's go back. That wheel, ooh, wrong thing, wrong wheel. Ah, I should look before I do. So that is going to be down there. There's a little space in there, and that looks a little more right. So now what I want to do, here's how we're going to play this game. To make more sense of this in relation to this, because I want this to look more natural, what I want to do is I want to rotate it the way it would look if it were going flat. So I'm going to do that. I want to make sure this looks right. Give me 1 second. Sorry, y'all. I want to pretend like this is a person on the ground, and I want to see how I'm going to make this look like if it's going to be that person riding that bike. So because of the perspective, it makes it a little bit weird. Let's see if I keep rotating. I got to make a little bit of sense out of this to make sure this works for what I need it to do. Okay, and I'm gonna move the other wheel a little bit behind just so we get a little bit of distance to make it feel a little more correct. That looks pretty good to me. So here's how we play the game. I'm going to take all three of these and I'm going to pre-compose those. So I'm going to right click, pre-compose. This is going to be moving biker. And this is going to populate right inside the first poem base again. Now, this composition, what's going to happen is going to rotate. Okay, so the wheels need to rotate. Notice the anchor of the wheel is at the very middle. The anchor of this person isn't really matter in this. Anchor of that wheel is at the middle as well. So what I want to do is I'm going to start at the beginning transit at start transit. Sorry, at the start of the transition, I'm going to hit the rotation. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this one, the rotation. Then I'm going to come over to the very end of the composition, and I'm just going to type like 2. Let's see. All right, so it rotates it, which, from the -17 takes it up to 1 and 3 through 45, whatever. Basically, the idea is I want to see what looks like a natural flow of wheels. First of all, they're going backwards, right? So let me let this load enough that we can see that she is, or that person is bike riding backwards. So that's not great. So let's go ahead and go the other route on this and make I use these buttons here to jump keyframe to keyframe, and you can tell you're overlapping a keyframe when it's blue here. If I move one frame to the left or one frame to the right, it won't be blue, okay? So basically, I'm gonna make this now -2, and I'm gonna make this one -2. And so now it's gonna move the other direction. So let's see how it looks. It's gonna take a second to load. This looks like it's going really slow, which is not fast enough for a human person to bike. So basically we want to make sure that this is going to be more. So we'll do like -3 and -3. Maybe that'll make it go twice as fast. But again, we want it to be the same because we want them rotating at the same time. Wheels don't rotate at different paces when they're moving, right? So I'm just going to give this a second to load to get a realistic idea of how fast that person's moving. And we can tweak this later too. That's kind of the nice portion, is that we can tweak the wheels once we're in the composition and working. So again, this is one more layer into that terrible movie, Inception. It's actually an okay movie. It's pretty decent. So this is what it looks like when the wheels are moving. Nope, still not fast enough. Now these are not perfect circles, and that's totally fine because it doesn't matter. That's what the artist drew them as. So we're just animating the artist's content for how it would look if it were moving. I'm not going to tweak and change the artist's drawing to make it fit whatever I'm going for. Sorry, give me a second. Bear with. Coffee break. Hey, that looks pretty okay. That's not super distracting. I think I'm going to go just a little bit faster just to make sure. And then I'm going to do my judgment in the real world. So I'm going to get out of moving biker and I'm going to go back to the first poem. I'm off composition because I'm too far off the edge. So let me zoom out. Start. Okay, so this is the biker, right? So the biker needs to start over here. And I want it to feel like this is the size of the biker when they get over to here, but we're coming from further away. So I'm going to scale. So I'm going to get the biker to what size I want it to be and then move it off. Anchor point. I want the anchor point to be with it. So the anchor point's over here of the composition. I want it to be with the biker. So I'm going to move the anchor point. And by that, what it actually does is it just moves the anchor, or it moves the biker to the anchor point. If I don't want to move in tens, I can literally just grab and wheel it one way or another and it'll move. So as you hold it, oof, my computer's making a lot of noise. It does not like this. But I basically just want the anchor of this to be right on the character. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that drop shadow that we talked about before, and I'm going to add that to just the composition of the moving biker. I don't want to add that to the other composition because I'd have to do each individually, and then their drop shadows would compete. Now the composition has a drop shadow, so all of the biker has a drop shadow. All right, so we have our size, we have our anchor point set. We're gonna go over here and we're gonna put our biker in our first position, realizing it's going to take a minute for us to even see this far over. It's gonna take a second before we actually get to seeing the biker moving, right? Because we have to actually transition. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna put the biker here, and then I'm going to jump up to, let's say, 14 seconds, and that's where I'm going to start the biker's actual movement. So first, I'm just going to do position. Here we go. I'm going to zoom, or let's just move my spot here. I'm going to look at my full composition. Basically, by the time we get to here, I want my biker to be boop, 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 boop. Okay. Let's zoom this out a little more so I can see, but our biker will be over to here by the end of this whole thing. Okay, so the biker is going to go from one side to the other. In the meantime, we have to get them to follow the path. So I'm going to jump and just kind of go along the path and just adjust the position. So for here, the biker would be up here, right? And then as we continue, have we gotten off our path? A little bit. So we'll go a little bit up higher. Okay, and then we'll keep going. That's fine. So we're going to mark this position because that's a good spot for it. And then we have to go down the street a little bit before we can cross. We don't want to just go off the grass. So we're going to go up to here. And then we're going to keep going along. If I play with this little arm here, I can kind of fix the arc that we're going to follow, which is good. So then I don't need to do much. I will put a, let's see actually how this looks. So that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and let this keep going. Over to here. That's fine. And I don't think we need to have this little curve at the end. That's not helping us at all. So I'm going to get rid of that curve by just pushing it to the middle. I am going to want to adjust the other point, the arm on the other point. So let's see, we're going to move over. Where's my control? Sorry. There we go. So I want to grab this. I just want to make sure that's going to be good. Grab this one. Anchor that, and then over to here. Just futz with that a little bit. We're going to change scale and everything once we get into there. Move down. Okay, so in effect, I'm going to get rid of this point and I'm going to make this the last point so that that's as far as it goes. So this looks like it's a broad discrepancy. So I just want to kind of spread these out a little evenly. And I want to see what it feels like with the movement, right? So from this point on, it won't actually move. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see the full scope. And then we'll start with, so I'm also going to just solo this layer real quick. Takes a second, but we're going to get an idea of how fast our character is moving. If it's moving really, really slow like this, that often means it's used up most of its processor. So a thing to remember is hitting edit, purge, all memory and disk cache. All memory and disk cache. In this case, there are 74 gigabytes of memory on my computer is currently being used to keep all those green frames in its memory. If I hit OK, this clears all the green frames. Generally, I do this whenever I finish an area. So if I'm working an area, I don't want to clear the frames so I can see everything in time. But if I finish working on an area and I'm done with it, I'll get rid of that. I'll clear the disk and cache. And basically what that does is then it allows me to start fresh. Now I have 93 gigs open memory that will hopefully make this move a little faster as it goes. So it might not mean it initially, but eventually it will hopefully pick up a little bit, but we're going to get a feeling for how fast this character is moving. And this is what it takes in time. So this takes time. It takes commitment to figuring these things out and making sure everything looks the way you want it to. That Cupid thing didn't just happen, right? There was so much time and so much effort put in to make sure the gravity was realistic, make sure the lighting was realistic. And each one of those things was a moment-to-moment working event. And basically what they did is they took a picture of the full thing, right? Just like I did when I did the wall. and they animated to that. They took it into the space and then they tweaked it and adjusted to fit wherever the specific things needed to go. So if something was slightly off, then they could just move the Cupid up a little bit, and now its feet were on the ledge as opposed to like under the picture or something. All right, let's look at our biker. How far did we get? Oh, we are not doing great. That's not going to be very, it's choppy because of how far it has to go, and it's not even that much. So let's see. Which means if the character's moving that fast, I need to move the wheels slower. Okay, so this is going to be a thing. I'm going to be working this out for a little bit to get the biker to do what it needs to do, but I don't want to spend we are basically at time. So that's basically where we're going to be for now. I do want to note that we have another layer here, the building facade, that when I bring this into the composition, what it's going to do, bring it over. This is just that building cut out with the windows open. And I'll have to do a little thinking to figure out how specifically I'm going to have the windows affected, because we see the biker in the window. So I'm going to have to create another layer so that we don't see the biker in the window. But basically, the biker is going to be able to go behind this layer. So we're just creating a false, by lining it up exactly where it is in the drawing, we've now just added a layer of depth where the character can be coming out from behind the building and interacting more with the world. Where are we at? It's got a process, sorry. So basically our character can be coming out from behind the building as we go. I have to add another back window, another layer in between that and the window, because you can see we have the biker in the window. I'm going to put the cat in the window eventually, but basically I'm going to need something behind the cat so that we don't see the biker behind the cat, because you don't see people through buildings, right? But this is just, again, another idea. I knew that the biker would have to go behind, so I either create a mask that it goes behind, or I go with the way that we've been working and I create a layer. I create a layer for it to go behind. Cool.